Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Millicent Walker. On this episode of Law Weekly, I'm on a mission to find out what happens next to the recommendations of the different panels of inquiry across the country. I speak to a senior advocate of Nigeria, Dr. Remi Olatubora, former Commissioner for Education and former Attorney General and Commissioner for Justice, Ondo State. According to him, inquiry reports are only investigatory and recommendatory, as they are not admissible in a court of law. He also speaks on other issues such as the direct primaries in the Electoral Act Amendment Bill. This is followed by a report on the Judges' Conference which took place in Abuja, and another report on the latest on the siege at Justice Odili's home from the House of Representatives and the special investigation by the Nigerian Bar Association. What is the duty of a panel of inquiry? What happens to the recommendations? And what is Nigeria's history of white papers from past panels of inquiry? In this interview, Principal Counsel of Remi Olatubora and Company starts by explaining the rules that apply in a panel of inquiry from that of a regular court.
The duty of the inquiry is to look at the truth of what happened. How did it happen? And then, of course, what are the recommendations that we are likely going to make to avoid such situation in the future? I expect that the committee report, the inquiry report of Lagos will contain the truth of exactly what happened, when it happened, and how it happened. And I feel that having had the courage to set up the inquiry in the first instance, the government of Lagos State would also be ready to also make the report of the inquiry public.
Especially the events of the Lekki Toll incident.
Yes, it was a disaster. And we must have a historical record of that disaster, so that revisionists will not come in future to tell us a story that is different from what exactly happened.
So if we have, and this is assuming that we have a report that indicts the government, in this case the federal government, what action do you expect the federal government would take?
Well, you see, we have to also know the limits of inquiry reports. Inquiries are investigatory and then, of course, recommendatory. Unlike a regular court can make definitive position. The regular court's responsibility is to know what happened, how it happened, who is liable, and then, of course, the penalty. But inquiry is very unlike the regular court. It would give you the report of what happened, how it happened, and what to be done to avert reoccurrence. Inquiry report also would identify those who are responsible. But inquiries have no power to make definitive determination.
Not to mention penalty.
Oh, yes.
What if the inquiry didn't address everyone's concern? What if there are still some people that, they hadn't concluded their case? What happens to them, especially if they want to take the matter to court? Are you saying they don't have that opportunity now? Since
they do. Even where an inquiry report has been rendered, if you feel that the report of the inquiry is not satisfactory enough, in the sense that the inquiry has not brought out exactly what happened, you can go to court.
But what evidence do you bring before the law court?
Oh, a lot of evidence.
The evidence has been used under the inquiry.
You will not be coming from the point of inquiry report. There was no evidence that was given in inquiry, particularly those who are in the virtual presentation, like video recording and all of this, that are not still available. There are people who are there when this event occurred. They are still alive. There are those who witnessed the shooting of some individuals who are very well known to them, and they are still alive. They can still be called to court to give evidence in the law court in support of whatever claim that you have before the court.
Looking at the panel and how it all started, ENDSARS, an end to the SARS squad, and then the good governance and the unfortunate incident of the Lekki tour in Lagos. Do you think that the panel of inquiries, and this is across the country, met the objectives at the end of the day?
Unfortunately, the only one that we have seen with so much seriousness and publicity is the Lagos inquiry. The Lagos inquiry is in the news at all times. When the report was presented to the governor, it was in the news. I have not heard any news about all other inquiries on the ENDSARS protest. I'm not saying they don't exist, but I have no information about them.
Do you think the people will be satisfied at the end of the day with the decisions of either the government, state government, or the federal government?
I think the people should be satisfied, particularly in Lagos State. The government has been very proactive, but that is also understandably so, because much of the destruction that came in the wake of the ENDSARS crisis happened in Lagos.
Historically, what has happened to white papers of previous panels?
Well, that is a story for the government that they will have to tell us in future, if not now. I've also been involved in a number of such interventions. For example, I was in the 2014 confab. The confab also was like an inquiry, even though it was not actually set up under the Tribunal of Inquiry Act, but it was an inquiry. What exactly is happening? Why are there so much dissonance between what the provision of our Constitution and then the desire of our people? We were there in Abuja for 6 months. So much recommendations were made. Electoral reform, all of this, the National Assembly is now attending to, were part of the report that was made in 2014. I served in the Committee on Electoral Reform, and I recall that we invited the chairman then of INEC, Professor Atahiru Jega. He didn't come in person, but he sent the most powerful delegation that can ever represent that commission to present for us what looked like a PhD thesis of possible electoral reform going forward that the country should embark upon. And between 2014 and now, we are still running on the same cycle. There's nothing that the National Assembly is talking about now. Electronic transmission of results, electronic voting, how to ensure the integrity of the electoral process that was not in the thesis by the delegation sent by Professor Atahiru Jega.
But this also doesn't mean that we shouldn't adopt some of these inquiries or implement them. And this is to forestall what the inquiries were meant to solve.
Yes, I think going forward, the inquiry law itself needs to be looked into. There's a need for reformation. Now, inquiry reports is not going to be admissible in evidence. Should we continue with that? There's no doubt that the reason why that law is made like that is to enable people to come out clean during inquiries, to be without any fear of likely use of the evidence given before the commission in subsequent judicial proceedings, either against their own interest or against the interest of somebody else. So I think the purpose of that particular provision, but should we continue with it? Shouldn't we be able to weigh the advantage to be gained if that particular section is taken out from the principle or for which that particular provision stands for as the law is at the moment. So I think one other aspect that we should also look into is that should we continue to make inquiries investigatory and recommendatory? Shouldn't we also give inquiry reports some level of definitiveness that you give to judicial decisions? All of these are what some other countries are looking into. And some have gone some way in effecting some amendments.
And for this to happen, we'll need the legislature.
Oh, yes.
Is the Constitution still the problem, as opined by some senior lawyers?
Yes. The Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria as it is today cannot take us to anywhere. Take that from me.
But the 2014 confab was by another administration, another political party. This is another administration, a different political party altogether. Do you expect that they would adopt that confab or have a new one?
I expect that they should look at those reports and look at those recommendations and take as much as they can take. Government is a continuum. It's not about political party. In developed democracies of this world, you don't have a government coming in, abandoning the project that the previous government left uncompleted. It will never happen in the United Kingdom. It will never happen in the US. It will never happen in any of those developed democracies. But it's only in Africa that you find a government coming in and then abandon. Sometimes they do it with so much bitterness that uncompleted bridge will be left undone because it was initiated by the government that came before. It is never done. Government is a continuum.
Let me ask my final question, and that is on direct and indirect primaries. Well, we know what the National Assembly has done recently, and there have been a lot of talk. A lot of people are not comfortable with direct primaries. What's your take?
Well, let me first and foremost congratulate the leadership of the National Assembly. For the first time in the recent history of the National Assembly, they have done what is very, very honorable. You know what they did? They took power from the political elites and give to the people. And that is all what democracy is all about. That singular intervention is a way of giving back, taking back from a clannish political elite to the people. And that is what democracy is all about. So it is a recommendation that we must celebrate. It is a revolutionary recommendation. And when you complement that with electronic transmission of results, electronic voting, which I know by the grace of God will finally come on board, you will have succeeded in giving power to the people, taking it from a cabal of very tiny political elites that have held this country in the jugular for so long a time that the country is now reeling in pains. You will have given it back to the people. Let the people choose who is to be their leader.